Is it possible to have a one call close as a B2B sales professional? Huh. On this episode, we're going to answer that question, and we may show you a process that could work for you. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, I have Mr. Jack Funk coming on the show. Jack's going to lay out a process that he utilized selling software to B2B companies, SMBs, on how he does a one-call close with them. Because for many of us, we might think one-call close, we're talking about like somebody doing like, selling roofing or selling one of these, door-to-door things. But no, this is actually for a B2B solution, software, SaaS world. How do you make that possible? Now, obviously, with the stakeholders being limited, this could work for in that environment. I also feel that oftentimes buyers may be ready to purchase, especially if they're inbound, but sellers oftentimes don't feel comfortable doing so. Jack is going to lay out a process that he follows, his strategy, the things that he does, two simple things, and how these strategies help him to be able to have more meaningful conversation, to help the buyer to feel comfortable, or build trust, and to make the investment. If this is your first time listening to our show, just know that the podcast is designed to do two things. One, help you to 3 to 5x your sales pipeline. Two, help you to double your close. And this episode could be that strategy that's going to help you. Sometimes you just got to open your mouth and ask. Listen, check out the episode, dive in with Jack, learn a little bit more about what he's doing, and see if this could apply to you and your team right now. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Don. It's awesome to be here.
I'm looking forward to the conversation here, to pick your brain, get a chance to learn from you a little bit. Now, you work for a little startup out in California, Silicon Valley area, may have a conference, something about dreaming. Companies called Salesforce. Talk to us about your capacity with Salesforce. What do you do exactly right now?
Yeah, Salesforce, definitely a small little startup. I've been with Salesforce now for a little over 3 years, and I actually started as an intern. So started kind of being a data monkey at Salesforce, and then was learning in the sales world as a sales development rep, then business development rep. Then I was a small business AE last year, and now I'm in our growth business segment, supporting a lot of our high-tech startups out of the San Francisco Bay Area. But I'm Denver based as well. But I've loved every moment. And I'm also a Salesforce certified admin, so I've really committed a lot of time to learning the product as well. And that's my main focus so far.
That's good, man, because I think sometimes you find people who are like, we know about the thing, but we don't know how to operate it. And I think this puts you in a unique situation where not only are you a certified admin, but you understand what to do. So this makes it so much easier for you to bridge the gap between client problem and an offering or solution that you guys have to offer.
Yep.
Money in the bank, man. Well, I was bragging about you in a teaser. You got recommended by someone to potentially be a guest on a podcast, and you also you are on there as well, and you get recommended to a bunch of people. So I was like, hey, let's talk to Jack and make this happen. And one of the things we started talking about, Jack, our podcast here is designed to help salespeople, whether it's to build pipe or it's to close a higher percentage of that pipe. Particularly, we are focusing around the closing. You did a strategy that that's one call close. And when you mentioned that, in my mind, I'm thinking one call close, that ain't going to be possible now when you're selling to B2B. But you're making me a believer. So I want to hear what that strategy is. If you could walk us through a strategy, and then we could talk about it with one of your clients, because we know that this could definitely help some of the sellers that are listening today. Does that make sense?
Totally. So I think that one, I'm just excited to be here. I definitely was recommending my bosses of like, hey, have my bosses on, but to be here is exciting. I think that the two main principles that I was kind of operating on in terms of trying to leverage a one call close, I originally came from insurance sales where I was selling home and auto insurance. And it was, if you didn't get it done on that call, like they were going to go work with someone else. So the main things that I try to operate off of is two things, which is to keep it simple, stupid, KISS, of like, that's a big acronym that I live by, of like, make it as simple as possible to buy from you. I think that that's one of the big things that led me to success, is that if you say, hey, we need 4 or 5 calls just to show you a demonstration, to show you something, a lot of times in other business, especially if you're talking to a decision maker, is like, I don't have time for that, right? Like, I just need to understand what it's going to be, and how to make it happen. And in my space, I was competing against HubSpot a lot, and so I know that this trying to make it applicable across other B2B selling experiences, but you want to give the customer every piece of information possible to make a decision, even if they never talk to you again, right? Pricing, what the solution looks like, what the IDP is, who you're talking to, and what problems it solves. And so typically what I would do is I'd get on the call. I was doing with a lot of inbound motion. So if you're an inbound sales rep, you can apply some of these practices. Is if you can get the first 2 to 3 questions out of them to know, like, is this a fit or not? Then I would kind of just say, like, hey, well, do you want to see something, right? And kind of flip my screen around. And I always would have a demo environment up on my screen. I'd flip it around and I'd demo it to them live while I'm talking. So that way I can kind of be doing some discovery, trying to talk through different pieces as I'm kind of showing them what the environment looks like. So that's piece number one. The second piece is then also that I'm a huge believer in sales karma, right? So like if it's the right thing for the customer, like always do the right thing for them. And so I think that a lot of times for me, that flipped around to if I have someone coming in that's just like, hey, like I'm really just having a tough time tracking calls and I just need someone to track calls. It's not my prerogative to oversell them on what they may need, right? You can add on a bunch of different things to Salesforce and make it overly complicated. But if they need the basic thing, even if it's not going to be the biggest commission check or something that's super exciting, just sell them the thing that they need, right? Like one of my old VPs used to say, like, see a bear, shoot a bear, right? Like if they need this thing, just sell them that thing. You don't need to make it overly complicated. So those were the two main principles that I was kind of operating under. I'm happy to kind of dive into more of my strategies or some of the things that I would say around those things. But to recap, it's keeping it simple and kind of sharing what you can do as you're talking to them. And then don't oversell and don't overcomplicate the process for yourself and be the easiest business to work with.
So go back to that. So one of the things from the top, are you dealing with now and this is obviously like amazing. When you're dealing with these are all the stakeholders, I imagine, the folks that's probably going to buy from you, that has the capability of saying yes, or a major influencer, in order for this one call close to work. Is that correct, or am I off on that?
So yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a crapshoot of like you might get, because in my previous role and in my current role now, like you might get on the phone with the person that is signing the contract, right? They filled out a lead form, they want to talk to you, and you might talk directly to the CEO. But I also found that a lot of the time, if you do have an influencer or a champion or someone, especially in the small business space, generally they're only one conversation away from making the decision. Like a lot of this advice I'm sharing is in the SMB specific space. There's probably not that large of a decision making process. It's probably not a board. It's probably just, hey, it's one conversation, or we're having the conversation of yes or no, this thing makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So with that thought, then go back to like, what percentage of these one call close would you say when you get set this up? You have 10 of them scheduled for today. About what percentage of them would close based on the strategy that you're sharing?
I generally had about a 30% conversion rate off of how I was going, because sometimes it's just not a fit, right? And sometimes it's just you're talking to an admin that was tasked with evaluating 7 different solutions. But if you can kind of do a little bit of the research beforehand, figure out who you're talking to, and they're kind of a director, VP, C-level person, or the owner themselves, you can kind of try to ask the right questions to get them into a, hey, should I just do this now? I was a communication studies major in college. I love negotiating toe-to-toe live. I think probably more than most folks. And I also think that alongside showing the demo of like, hey, this is what our solution does, right? If you work at kind of more of a point solution business where you can say like, this is the problem we solve, like a DocuSign, right? Like we solve the e-signature solution. There's probably some bells and whistles you can show, but if you can get to the bare, like this is the problem they have, I can solve that. Then I think it starts to go into like, why would you not do this, right? And I like trying to kind of flip it on a customer to be like, yeah, I mean, like changing your CRM is probably a little bit of a problem. Like, why would you not do this? Is there a reason you guys wouldn't want to do this? And you can hear right away what the blockers would be, and you can address them right there live with them, as opposed to if you have to take another call or you have to go on and bring in your solution engineer, your VP, or things like that.
All right. So walk me through one of your deals. This clearly has worked for you. You know, this framework that you have outlined here. walk me through one of the deals that you've worked with in the past, and that was a one call close. Obviously, you don't have to tell us the company's name, but give us like the texture of who you were talking to and how the conversation started and the motion that you ran.
Totally, totally. So one of the ones, also Don, can you still hear me? It looked like it cut out for you for a second.
I'm still
Perfect.
here. I'm still good.
Perfect. Probably on my side. One of the ones that was definitely probably a favorite from last year was a whiskey company that I got to work with. So they came in, realized I was talking directly to the COO, so my framework was going to be a little bit different than if I was just talking to like an admin or a director. So the COO came in and he pretty much was just saying, "Hey, we really just need sales accountability." He kept saying, "Sales accountability is the big thing that we need." So in my mind, I didn't want to try to overcomplicate the process. They were a small, growing whiskey company. I said, like, "Hey, do you want me to just flip around my screen? I can share generally how I'm doing this because obviously at Salesforce we use all of our own tools. So I'm kind of like, here, this is how I'm tracking my sales accountability, and I could show you in a demo environment like this is how you could be tracking for your sales reps." And I flipped it around, and then the big things that I started trying to ask were like, why do you need this sales accountability? Like, what does that actually mean to you? And he was like, well, we're hyper scaling really fast. We went from like 3 million to 15 million in sales, and we've got no idea who's talking to who, and we're getting a lot of like duplicate efforts, and we're having some duplicative motions that are happening. And so from there, once I kind of share the demonstration, I like to kind of get a gut check halfway through of the demo. Generally, I'll show like about 50% of what the solution does, and I'll kind of say, like, is this making sense? Like, does this look compelling? Is this something that you could see yourself logging into every day and actually making use out of? And then he was like, yeah. And then I was like, sweet. I mean, I don't know what your decision making timeline is, but like, are you opposed to making a decision on this today? And a lot of times, if you kind of make that ask, or you say, like, I would love to like ask for your business, right? Like, are you willing to move forward with us? It's kind of a little bit of a pattern interrupt. And for him, he was like, I mean, I guess so. Like, what does that mean? Is there like a reason that I should do something now versus later? And then I'll pull up Salesforce's pricing sheet and I'll just kind of price it out live, and I'll go toe to toe. I'll be like, hey, if the cost is X, if you do it today, it's Y. And again, granted, if you're at an SMB where you can actually negotiate and you have the ability to adjust your own pricing, like that makes a difference.
Come
But
on,
that was the
man.
big thing that I was leaning on. Is then I just kind of was trying to gut check him live. Hey, how much does it really make sense for you to do this? How painful is this lack of sales accountability for you? And I was able to just be like, here's the price. And then he was like, sounds good. And then I shot over the DocuSign later after that, and he signed it. And then now I still drink their whiskey. It's delicious stuff. And they're now Salesforce customers. So it worked out for me.
So go back to this idea again. Again, pretty phenomenal here. The couple things I've analyzed after you've explained it the first time. I started thinking about it as you explained the motion with this client. Well, prospect and now client. I saw it even more so when you tell them they tell you what they're looking for. Dude framed it out to you. Accountability. What I've come to learn over the years is that 65% of the human population are visual learners.
Yep.
So, in that vein, by me showing you and walking through it, it's almost like reality TV, like you're peeping behind the curtains, or it's like, bro, am I supposed to be seeing this? This is not the real demo, is it? Like, no,
Right.
this is my work environment. I'm just going to show you. It makes it feel like it puts them, it allows them to see it contextually, and it helps to bridge the gap with not only the learning and the comprehension, but then also the use case. Because no matter what you say at that point, I start to visualize in my brain how my sales team would operate in that environment. And especially
Yes.
if there's a similar makeup, it's kind of like, okay, this is a no-brainer at this point. I don't have to set up another demo. I don't have to get a bunch of more people together. It's like, yeah, it sounds like it works. And the numbers, it works for me. There's no like, hoodwinking or let me go talk to my manager and try to get a discount. It's like, this is what the offer is as well, if that makes sense. And the pain or the challenge is already strong enough, and you exemplified it. I love that when you're walking through it, it's kind of like you walking me, I don't know, giving a tour. and then you just tell you're having a conversation with me at the same time. It's just kind of like, so why do you need it right now? Let me show you how this works, by the way. And so
Yep.
how difficult is you think it's gonna be to make a decision? By the way, this is where we keep our stuff. I don't know, like it feels not supernatural. It feels very natural.
Yeah. No, I think that another thing that really helps me a lot is like and a lot of my previous bosses will say I'm really not a big fan of doing slide decks, and I don't love making slide decks, but I love just spinning around my org and doing a demo. Like,
Hmm.
because I think if you show a slide deck, there's some sort of stat out there that like generally folks lose focus like at some point through the
Oh,
slide deck, or it's less compelling when you're just sharing a slide deck. So I really like to kind of just be like, hey, this is my org. This is also a demo org. I can share like a lot of times my favorite trick that I'll do is like in Salesforce, obviously you can create like custom objects and move things around really quickly. So I'll just like move stuff
hmm.
around for them live, and they're like, "Wait, did you just do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you don't have to have this organized over this way. Like, I don't want to make your process fit this tool. I don't want to make my tool fit your process." And that a lot of times will get someone to kind of think a little differently of like, okay, well, is it actually that hard? And because I'm an admin too, sometimes I'll even go into the backside of like the setup of it. I'll show them like, here's how you could make this and that. And again, like one of the big things I was thinking about before I came on this podcast is like, I know that I have a different skill set than most folks. If I spent like 100 hours like learning how to be a Salesforce admin and how to administer an org, but all that to say, if you work for another SMB that has a specific solution that does something in payroll or does something for time tracking or things like that, like go sit with your solution engineer, your engineering team for like an hour or two and be like, hey, if I'm going to sell this to a customer, how can I learn how to like leverage the tool and like show it to someone faster? Because I think it's so much more impressive when you can actually talk about how easy the tool is to use or how quickly you can deploy it or how quickly you can change what you're doing with the tool than if you do have to back up the bus and bring 75 people to a conversation, because at least in the SMB space, that's just not it's not relevant anymore. It doesn't resonate because you have to be able to move as quick as the customer wants to move and make sure that whatever solution they're looking for, like if you're not, it's like kind of right of first refusal. If you're not the first one there, you might just lose it because someone else will get there and be faster. Like I always compete against HubSpot all the time. And if I don't give my customer or my prospect all the information they need, and I say I need 3 more calls, I'm probably going to lose that time. So if you can get things done on one call, or at least just get all the information out on one call, you have a much higher success rate, I've found at least.
Love it. The other component that I want to go back to is like, what about when you get objections on these? How do you handle objections to help maintain the integrity of the one call?
I think that the objections are definitely dependent on where they're coming from, and I think that you start to get a little bit if you start asking for one call closes, you start to get a barometer of like what's a real objection or what's like a fake objection, right? I think that when you get pricing objections, you haven't done enough of a discovery on why this is painful for them. I think if you get an objection around a timeline, I like to always kind of try to get some sort of understanding of why that is, right? For example, I'm working with a customer now, and it probably could have been like a one-ish call close, but he's like, I need to talk to the co-founder and do this, that, and the other thing. And so at that point, then I'll go, if it's not price, but it's something else, I then try to shift and say, well, if I can change the price, does that alleviate this objection? Or if it's this other piece, I'll kind of try to redirect the prospect every time they do have some sort of objection. And that oftentimes will allow me to kind of take back control of the timeline of it. Because in every sales cycle, every time you get objections is when the prospect or the customer is trying to regain control, right? Well, hold on.
Yeah.
This is moving too fast. It's too expensive. I need to talk to more people. You need to kind of go back to like, well, what if it is cheaper? What if me delivering this solution does mean this for you? And there are times where like, yeah, you might get one that like, hey, I'm not the CEO, I can't sign. Like it's kind of hard to overcome that one. But there are some some ways to kind of like shift the objection and try to reframe it so that way they don't actually think that you've lost any of the power, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's there's this, you want the buyer to feel they're making a decision, and they should be, and you want to make sure that they see you as a consultant where they trust your opinions, and where it comes
Yeah.
across that, I'm not trying to just get something, trying to get a quick win and get a little commish. I'm really trying to help you
Yep.
with a business problem that you're facing. And I think the way that you're articulating that makes sense in that vein. Like, the objection is there, let me I mean, again, the objection may come up because I perceive there's a risk that I'm not comfortable with yet, and I need to make sure I can help regain and to mitigate that risk. Because I'm not, like you said at the very top, you're not going to put somebody in a situation and sell them something that they don't need. You want to help them to make sure that they're going to win. And when you are when you do have that consultant control and trust from the buyer, it makes them feel like, all right, dude's gonna look out for my best interests. And especially if you're willing to walk away from something, it even I think gives you even more credibility for you and your organization, where it's like, yeah, what you're looking for, it's not something that we can do. You might want to go back to just keeping an Excel doc.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that kind of goes back to one of the original questions I shared, right? Is like, why do you even want to do this, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you not do this? Like the customer I was just talking to earlier today, I was like, what happens if you just stay the same? Like, if you just don't do anything, what happens? What's the cost of doing nothing? And when you can get the customer and the prospect to say a lot of things in their own words, it becomes more real to them, right? And like,
Yeah.
I do believe that, like, yeah, if I flip around my org and I show you a demo org and it wasn't like a super crazy process, you're kind of like, is this some like insider track? Like, how did I get this far along in the deal cycle to see that? But it's kind of like a trust building exercise, if anything, right? I also, when I negotiate with customers, like, I tell them directly, these are the levers I can pull in terms of getting you a good deal. And I oftentimes will say, like, I'm happy to share you like 2 DocuSigns or 2 order forms of like, this was the original list price and this is the deal you got from Salesforce, right? And you took us to the cleaners, and things like that
Mm,
come across a lot more like, hey, this guy actually is just really trying to help me. Like, he's not trying to make my life hard. He's not trying to make it super difficult to buy. And I think that when you do those types of like more trust building, and I like to tell customers like, thanks for leaning in with me, thanks for getting out on the ledge with
yeah.
me on this experiment and try to think about this. That helps the customer be like, all right, like, people buy from people they like, right? Like,
Yes.
I Salesforce may be better than HubSpot, I don't know, but if I can kind of if I can make the customer and the prospect feel like I really am just trying to get them back to doing their job and not they have to kind of engage hours and hours with me, that makes a big difference.
Bro, love it. I'll go back to the top of the episode again. One of the things I feel that just makes it so much more engaging and makes this process and this method works, at least for me, is the rawness of it. And it goes back to what you were just sharing and demonstrating here. But the asking that question at the very top, like, um, do you have can I show you what that's like? It's, again, it's more not like, let's set up a demo. It's like, can I just show you what I do with that use case you just
Yep.
mentioned? All day, every day, I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Come on, man. Is there pressure you
Because you'd
feel
be
though now
surprised.
that
They're
you're
just like, yeah, let me see it.
like, all right, let's just go ahead and buy this thing? 30%
Yep.
close rate. It's pretty remarkable. Do you feel any pressure though going into this when it comes to this one call? Like, if you're going to do a one call close, or back up, do you say in your mind this is going to be a one call close, or you go in the environment and say, hey, maybe this is not going to be, maybe this is going to be, but if so, what are some of the, do you feel any pressure, and if not, how do you make sure you don't feel pressure or put more pressure on the buyer?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I actually got some awesome feedback from one of my prospects that I closed last year. It was a 7 month long deal cycle that was originally supposed to be a one call close. That was supposed to be like
Hmm.
a quick, hey, get it done. But then they had a lot of things happen, and then they eventually bought in January, and we started talking like in the middle of the summer. And he was like, one of the big things that you have to do as a sales rep is you can't ever let your leadership's pressure coming down that you need to close deals and you need to get deals done be felt by the customer, right? And I think that a lot of times there's a little bit of the like, hey, this discount's valid now but won't be valid later. I think that I would always try to say like, let me just get you started, right? Let me get you in the door. Let me open up all the doors for you so you can have this happen. And I think when I came at it with that mentality, as opposed to like, I need to get this deal done right now, it allowed me to have a little bit more of a, like, you could see I'm on the call, I'm talking to you, I'm pretty calm, I'm high energy, but I'm not ever going to be like overbearing on a customer. And that's really the way that I've tried to operate, because if you need it, you need it, right? If you don't, you don't. That's fine. I can't force you to buy it. I can't force you to sign this DocuSign. Like, people only want to help themselves up to a point. So again, I go back to like, if I can give, if it was more, Donald, that I would feel the pressure on myself if I didn't give them all the information they needed to make a decision, right? Which is partially why when I got my Salesforce admin certification and things like that, I wanted to have all the knowledge to answer all their questions live, because I think it comes across a little bit tougher when you're on a call and someone has a question and you say like, let me get back to you on that, I don't know. It's better to say I don't know than to make up an answer. But if you have all the answers and you can give them all the information, then I can kind of leave that call with a clear conscience. It's if I don't have all the information, I can't give it to them all at once, that's when I then kind of feel a little bit of the pressure on myself. So I always try to make sure that I do my research on who I'm talking to, what their business does, all that stuff before the call. So I don't really have to do that much discovery on like, well, what does your business do? It's like, I can very clearly see you're an artificial intelligence company that's doing this, this, and that to these types of customers. Let's talk more about your process and your pain. And then let me just show you something. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, no worries.
Love it. Oh my goodness. So good. Simple, but effective. If somebody's listening to this call and they're thinking about trying
Keep it simple, stupid.
There you go. I'm listening to this call and I'm thinking about trying this. What's the first thing that you would tell me before I get started? Or something that might be holding me if I want to try it, but I'm a little nervous. What would you tell me that I need to do before I get started?
Totally. I mean, I think that if you've never tried a one call close, to try and practice it on some of like the lower, I guess, the smaller deals, the ones that aren't really going to break your pipeline if they don't want to do it. But it's all about just like starting to ask, right? Like in my previous role, a lot of people weren't thinking about trying to do that. Salesforce does a very prescriptive disco demo pricing, right? Sometimes partner introduction if you're going to choose a partner and help them and have them implement the solution. But for me, I was like, let me see if I can just do it all at once. Because when you can shorten the sales cycle, I've found you can increase your success rate, because time kills all deals. And the longer you take to do your deal, the more chances something's going to come in. They're going to see another ad for something else. It's going to get like something's going to get botched along the way. So I would say just start with the smaller ones and just try it if you've never tried it or even thought about it. And then the second thing would be, like I said, like go sit with your engineering team, go talk to your solution engineer if you have one, and be like, what are the 3 or 4 things that if I can just learn these things, or if I can flip around my screen and show, it'll make your life easier. Because like, don't get me wrong, if I get an RFP from a customer and they want to see 7 different Salesforce things, I can't do that in one call. And I need my solution engineer to come in and help me answer different things and do more of the technical fit. But if you are in a high volume, small business, fast paced motion, if you can start trying to make the ask, it's better to ask and get a no than to not ask and have no idea, because they might have bought on that call, and then you can move on to the next one.
Love it, man. If folks want to get in touch with you, Jack, they want to learn a little bit more from you, what's the best way for them to go about doing so?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn, Jack Walter Funk. I've got an awesome photo of me on there that's very professional. Or you can hit me on my email, j.funk@salesforce.com. And I think my Gmail, I've got the photo of me and my 2 French bulldogs. I look a little bit more approachable and not as serious. But LinkedIn and email, hit me up whenever. I'm a huge, huge fan of trying to give advice and give back, which is why I was so excited to get on this call, and hopefully some folks find this helpful.
Jack, man, appreciate you and appreciate the insights you're willing to share and part with us today and helping us as we continue to navigate our own journey as sales professional. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Perfect. Thank you, Donald. Really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
That was Jack Funk. Go ahead and connect with Jack on LinkedIn. Tell him that you heard him here on The Sales Evangelist. Tell him that your boy Donald sent you. As always, man, I am so pumped. I am so pumped for when good stuff starts happening and people are thriving and succeeding. And I want you to do that. I mean, the softwares and the tools that we recommend on the show, the sponsors, they have some great stuff that's going to help you out tremendously. And I highly recommend you take advantage of it. There was some link down in the show notes that can benefit you and your sales team. As always, I want you to thrive. I really, really, really do. I want you to succeed. I want you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out and do big things. Thanks so much for being here.